going to do a very brief introduction to Fran Lebowitz, who, as they say, needs no introduction. She's a native of New Jersey who long ago crossed the bridge. Her early work appeared in the pages of Andy Warhol's Interview. She went on to write 2 books, Metropolitan Life and Social Studies, before being taken hostage by a version of writer's block so severe that the rest of us in sympathy write less. She's had a reoccurring role as a judge in Law & Order, which despite her lack of a law degree seems to be like a position she's well qualified for. And most recently was the subject of a documentary, Public Speaking, directed by Martin Scorsese, a filmmaker she's described as promising. I've known Fran since 1985, but this is actually our first conversation, as I've actually been too terrified to talk to her. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Please welcome Fran Lebowitz.
Hi. This is a nice touch, Dave.
It's a nice. So, one of the things, of the many things that I wanted to ask you about is that PEN, as you know, is this writers' organization that supports freedom of expression. And I thought, why don't we just start there, which is your thoughts on the importance of free expression, despite what seemed like a downside.
Could you repeat the last part of that, please?
Well,
is this working?
It is working. I think it's working. Obviously, I think free expression is very important, but I can imagine there are some people that I can picture you not wanting to really hear what they think. So I'm just curious your thoughts about the overall idea of free expression.
I don't want to hear what they think, but I think they have a right to think it.
Exactly.
Okay?
Right.
I believe also in freedom of not listening.
Right, exactly. That's the Second Amendment. Yeah.
Yes.
Or 1A. Yes, exactly. The theme of this year's talk, or this year's festival and the talk, is bravery. Do you think of yourself as a brave person?
I don't think of myself as much as you might imagine, period. I'm past the thinking of myself age.
Yeah.
It's incredibly relaxing. I don't think of myself as a brave person. I don't actually think in these terms because I'm lucky enough not to have to.
Right.
All right, so I know that everybody here probably hates the United States of America, but one of the best things...
Is that a given at a
But
PEN
I am
event?
not to be counted among those people because I don't have to think about being brave.
Right.
Okay, I mean, Americans are called brave if they participate in a triathlon.
Right.
I mean, we don't know the meaning of this word.
Right.
Anymore.
Are New Yorkers brave just if they leave the house?
It depends where they live.
Where they live.
Yes. I mean, and New Yorkers are going to have to be the bravery that New Yorkers have to have when they leave the house has almost entirely to do with bicycle riders.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's getting worse as you see these horrible things they're putting all over town.
Right.
Okay? I mean, one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Yes.
In the streets of New York, and I've lived here since 1969.
Yes, and it's done away with most parking. If there was ever parking, it's
No, there's parking next to it.
Yes.
Yes, because Bloomberg has apparently zero idea of geometry. He keeps putting more and more things in the street, but the streets are the same size.
It's actually true. I was actually run over last week by a bike rider going the wrong way at 14th and 9th, where there's also one of those pedestrian parks in the middle of the street now.
Yes, in the street.
It's
yes.
very confusing. I couldn't even get mad at the guy. We're all confused.
I'm mad at the guy. I'm not confused. Okay? The furniture that is strewn about the city,
yes.
which I believe to come from the apartments of New Yorkers who can no longer afford an apartment large enough to contain furniture.
Right.
So everyone says, I don't know, I don't have room for a chair. Put it in the street. So they're in the street where they are occupied by tourists.
Right.
Okay, because Bloomberg's plan for New York was to replace the citizens with tourists.
With tourists, right.
And he has been very successful at this.
You have talked a bit about the Bloomberg measuring for how small can the apartment be to be
repulsive.
Right.
I don't know if you happen to see this.
Yeah.
I actually saw this on television, on the news, and it was Bloomberg and Amanda Burton showing you the city apparently owns some property, someplace in the East 20s, I think it is.
Yeah.
And they are going to turn these buildings into something called micro apartments. Like, we don't already all have these. Okay.
So there was a shortage of that.
Yes, there was what? Because the thing that you most frequently hear New Yorkers complain about is that their apartments are too big.
Right.
So, and these are like, I don't know, 9 by 12 inches.
Yeah.
And
They're made to measure. I mean, you have to be
Yes.
custom fit for your apartment.
Basically, first, it's your shoe size.
Right.
So, and I said that, I don't know, I personally was offended to see a billionaire and a millionaire deciding how small an apartment we could live in.
Right.
It was repulsive.
And
These
then it's
people
true
are repulsive.
And then they put the furniture outside because you don't need the
That's
chair
right. And they said,
inside.
put the furniture outside for
Right.
the tourists.
Right. Right.
That's a command economy.
Yeah.
I don't know what you asked me.
I don't either. Just to elaborate on that, not knowing what I asked you, I was curious what your thoughts are about what's happening here in the village, because you are now, in recent years, a village resident, and it seems that NYU is slowly,
Not slowly.
and also and the closing of St. Vincent's, because I worry about what will happen when I have a heart attack.
Okay. Which should I address first? NYU? Okay. Everybody always says, at least everyone downtown, always prefaces their criticism of NYU by saying, of course I love NYU. I don't love NYU. And why of course? Why would you? I mean, NYU has done things that are absolutely illegal. I mean, they knocked down Washington Square South, okay, to put up one giant suburban piece of junk after another.
Yeah.
Okay? There is a building now in Washington Square Park.
Yes, there is. There's
Yes,
a brand
public
new one.
restrooms. Okay? I mean, Washington Square Park used to just be a public restroom.
Right, exactly. You didn't have to go inside.
Yes.
Right.
And now they're building these, 90-story hotels or whatever,
Right.
And it costs something like, I'm not sure how much, but like $60,000 a year to go to NYU. The only good thing about NYU is they, meaning the so-called students, who don't look really that studious to me,
Right.
The so-called students
Right.
never, ever go east of Broadway or west of 6th Avenue. So basically, they treat this like the suburban campus it should be, and I would personally be happy to go upstate and find them a large piece of property to move the whole thing out
Yeah.
of New York.
And on St. Vincent's?
St. Vincent's Hospital, our mayor, who believes himself to be known as the public health mayor, has presided over the closing of more hospitals than any mayor in the history of New York. And the reason is always the same. This place where this hospital is used to be not that valuable, but now it is. And all these hospitals are being replaced by very expensive apartments or hotels. And so he didn't say a word about the closing of Vincent's
Do you think it would be
Hospital.
okay if the apartments had suction? I mean, when they built the apartments, they put the oxygen and all the things in, so
You mean for
right,
people my
for
age?
us. Yes, that's right.
No, New Yorkers don't need oxygen. That's clear. And so he didn't say a word, except that St. Vincent's Hospital wasn't making enough money.
Right.
Like the purpose of every institution is to make money. So of course it wasn't making enough money. They're not supposed to make any money. Why should hospitals make money?
I got rabies shots at St. Vincent's Hospital, and it was $7,000.
Really? How did you get rabies?
I met a bat in the middle of the night.
I see.
I hooked up.
Okay.
It wasn't. I know. I can't help it. It wasn't voluntary. Anyway, yeah.
That would be a hate crime,
Yeah.
which I don't believe in.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Can you say more about that?
Yes, I do not believe in hate crimes. I mean, I do not believe there should be such a thing as a hate crime. Almost all the things that are hate crimes are already crimes. Okay? I mean, it is a crime to beat someone up. If you beat
Right.
them up just because you don't like them, or you beat them up because they're Jewish, or because they're black, or because they're gay, it should be the same crime, because otherwise a hate crime is a thought crime. So I know this is not going to be popular. I can feel how unpopular this is, but it is an infringement. It infringes on what you're thinking. If
The
you're
notion
thinking,
of-
I just hate this guy because I
Right.
hate him, or I hate this guy because he's gay,
You should be free to think that, right?
we should be free to think that. The beating up part is the crime,
Right, is the crime.
not the thinking part.
There's so many paths to go down here, but one of them was, and you've spoken a little bit about that you're for revenge.
I am for revenge, yes. I am for revenge.
Yeah.
And it's good no matter when you get it. Okay?
So it doesn't expire.
Yes. I mean, some people say, it's best cold, it's best hot. It just, it's really has to do with opportunity. Okay?
And the other side of that is you've said you're not so interested in forgiveness.
It's not that I'm not interested in it, it's that I actually don't know what it means. I genuinely do not know what it means.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means. I've asked many people, what does
Yeah.
it mean? It must mean forgetting, all right? Because otherwise, what does it mean? You know,
Letting go of something, being willing to sort of a certain kind of generosity.
no, I don't think it's that. You know, I mean, I have forgiven people in the sense that I have decided not to
Press charges, for
press
example.
charges. Yes, I mean, you know, I think, well, yeah, okay, I'll let that go. But I didn't forget about it.
Right.
Okay, and it didn't. It absolutely changes my. If someone does something to me,
Yeah.
which I would be the judge of doing something to me, even if they don't think they did something to me, then I never forget that they did something to me. Sometimes I stop speaking to people for so long. There actually is one person that today I was reminded of that I didn't remember why I stopped speaking to
Right.
him.
That can happen.
But I'm certain it was for a good reason, and I'm not going to relent
Right.
now.
Does that fall in the category of recovered memory? Or yeah. Okay then. So moving
It's a
straight ahead.
Christian idea, anyway.
Right.
Forgiveness. I mean, in fact, forgiveness is Christianity.
Because
It is why there are so many more Christians than Jews. All right, everybody was Jewish. Then Jesus came, and he said, I'll forgive you. And then all the same people became Christians, left with just a bunch of judgmental Jews like myself.
But you know, at Yom Kippur every year, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to even forgive for like the things you didn't even do. You're
No,
supposed
Yom
to repent
Kippur is
for
not
things
for forgiveness, it's for repentance. We don't have a forgiveness holiday. Okay? That's them. Yom Kippur is you repent for your sins, and that's it.
and you just leave it at that.
No, you repent for them, and that's it. You don't get forgiven them.
I did read something though where you're supposed to make the effort to let others know that you are. I'm having trouble saying the word forgiveness now. You are forgiving them.
Yes, but it's not for. It's in religion, I believe. Not that I'm
Yeah.
an expert on the subject. It is not people forgiving you. It is God forgiving you.
Yes, well, that's
and the
true.
Jewish God does not forgive people. The Jewish God is a judge.
So
So that's why I feel godlike myself.
Now, going in the direction of the judicial, I can't even speak. You play a judge on TV, and it does seem to become you. I mean, it seems a part that you're quite suited for.
I know it's my destiny. I
It
feel.
is.
It's also my hobby because I played a judge
Right.
on Law and Order,
Right.
and then I just recently played a judge in Martin Scorsese's new movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, and I'm about to play a judge in another movie. It's my hobby.
Exactly.
And when I started doing the judge on Law and Order, people started asking me, "Why are you playing this tiny part? Are you hoping to get bigger parts?" And I said, "No, I'm hoping to become a real judge."
Well, that's what I think. Yeah, I can see that exactly.
Because it comes, I can't act at all.
Right.
So I have been offered other parts from this, and I just said, no, I can't do that. I can only be a judge because I am judgmental.
Right.
And I am hoping to become a Supreme Court judge.
Yeah.
Because you do not have to be a lawyer to be a Supreme Court judge, and I'm already not a lawyer.
You know, I'm thinking this path, it worked for Ronald Reagan. I don't see what's impeding I mean, I think it's a given at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
and also, the Supreme Court gets cases that are so easy. I don't know what takes them so long. Like, every single Supreme Court decision that I'm aware of, I could decide in 2 seconds.
Right.
Because I make snap judgments, which are the best judgments.
Right. Yes.
Because slow judgments means there's corruption.
Right.
It means you're listening to other voices.
Right.
Okay, the Supreme Court especially, it's really simple. They have a document, which is very clear, although apparently not to Republicans.
Right. Right. Yes. I have this weird dim memory that there was a while where you and Toni Morrison were watching a lot of court TV.
Not court TV. Tony rooked me into watching the entire trial of the Menendez brothers.
Right. Okay. Now it's coming back to me. Yeah.
Which took an entire year. A year of my life, which is apparently more valuable than a year of Tony's because she won the Nobel Prize anyway during that year. And this is because, although I had known Tony for a long time, the Menendez brothers trial, which you may not know, started every day. It was televised. It started every day at noon. And we watched it on the telephone every day.
I remember, yeah.
The entire
Right.
day. And I was thinking at the time, well, it must be okay to do this. Tony's doing it. And then I discovered, I never knew this about her, that Tony gets up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning and writes until like 11 o'clock. So Tony had already had a day's work.
Right.
I myself, after watching the Menendez trial all day, I was exhausted. I felt I'd put in a full day, and that was it.
Right. Yeah.
She also convinced me that
Yeah.
the Menendez brothers were innocent.
Really?
Yes, she was wrong. She thought O.J. Simpson was innocent, too.
Really?
Yes, she's very forgiving, Tony.
That's actually very interesting. One of the questions, leaping ahead and sideways, do writers have a kind of social responsibility beyond the bounds of, say, a plumber or a bus driver? Do you think there's something about being a writer or a judge?
No. Artists do not have a social responsibility. I really believe that.
Yeah.
They
do they have
do
any
not have
responsibility?
that because, no, they have no responsibility at all. That's why they become artists. No, I don't think that artists have social responsibility. I think it's very important that people realize that they do not have that. Because if you think that you have it, or you let other people think that, then they demand that you meet their standards, which are probably very poor.
You have very high standards.
I have very high standards, yes, but they don't.
Right.
Okay.
So,
when they go, when Giuliani decides there can't be a painting at the Brooklyn Museum,
right,
despite the fact that he's never been in a museum, if you think that artists have social responsibility, then perhaps this artist has not met his social responsibilities. But if you just say the artist has only responsibility to himself, then you don't have to go along with Giuliani. In other words, it's people like that who think artists have to meet certain standards. Their standards of decency or their idea of social responsibility.
Yes.
Okay? And so once you say an artist has any social responsibility, you are walking into their idea of it.
Do you think that we as individuals have a kind of social responsibility or political responsibility?
Citizens. Yes.
And
you have the responsibility to be a citizen.
Yeah.
Okay?
What are we supposed to do?
Well, not just vote once in a while, okay? I mean, that seems to be...
Although that's an important one that we often apparently don't do.
Yes, but except that, I blame the Congress on all the delightful young people who so proudly cast their first vote for Obama the first term and then never voted again, hence the midterms.
Right.
Because I went to vote for the midterms, since I'm a fabulous voter, and even though I live in a neighborhood where the average age is like 22, I was the youngest person there voting.
Right, that's true. It's
Another
like
reason to hate NYU.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't just like vote once and then just say,
I voted.
I'm
Maybe
fantastic.
they don't know that they're supposed to vote again. Maybe.
Well, that would be just one of the many things they seem not to know.
Yeah.
Yes, citizens have responsibilities, and that is to pay attention. One of the responsibilities is to pay attention to things. So to understand that certain things that are constantly presented to you as movements in the culture are in fact businesses. Okay, so that if you turn on the news and you see them talking about these Google glasses for like 20 minutes, it's an ad for Google, okay, which is a business, okay? It's not an idea, okay? It's not a scientific, it's not a laboratory, it's a business.
Yeah.
So you have a responsibility to know what is a business and what is a cultural institution.
Right.
And Google is a business. It's a company, just like Coca-Cola, except more harmful.
Do you have, one of the things I think about is I have concern about how in this country it seems like we're losing some sense of class, and that soon there will only be two classes, the rich and yoga. I was just curious what you thought.
The rich and what?
Yoga.
Yoga is part of the rich, believe me.
Yes.
You'd be surprised at how little yoga goes on in the South Bronx.
Yeah.
Okay?
But when you think about sort of the economics of what's going on, is that, I think a lot about sort of our responsibility as citizens. Is it also to make sure that we have...
Well, our responsibility as citizens, among our many responsibilities,
is
to at least note that, although, of course, it was horrible, the bombing at the Boston Marathon, the same day where 3 people were killed, the same day 14 people were killed in the explosion in Texas at the fertilizer plant.
Right.
Okay? Now, I don't think the numbers are that important. However, the reason that all these people were killed at this fertilizer plant is because there are no inspections of businesses in Texas. Because in Texas, they have the freedom to kill workers. Okay? And so that is something at least equally important to what happened in the Boston Marathon. Okay? And that is a class issue.
Right.
That is wholly a class issue. The people who run the marathons don't think about people who work in fertilizer plants in Texas. Okay? And the people who live in this town in Texas, they weren't angry either at the owner of the plant, because everyone has been pushed into these ideas of their allegiances, which really have more to do with like the kind of things they buy than things that really are important, which is, truthfully, these differences in people are economic. Mm-hmm. You can call them something else, but they are economic.
Right.
So if you are afraid to say anything about the guy who runs the fertilizer plant, what is a fertilizer plant, by the way? It's a giant bomb. That's what it is. It's a gigantic bomb. And apparently, it had not been inspected for 28 years. Okay, 28 years. Okay, yet every single restaurant in New York, they're inspecting every 2 seconds to make sure that your sushi is pristine. And that must be the way that everyone wants it, because that's the way it is.
Right, right. One of the things that interests me is the way that we get news, and the way that that's changing, in the sense that newspapers are closing foreign bureaus. I mean, besides the fact that newspapers are closing, I'm curious what your thoughts are about literally how we get information and how accurate the information we get is.
Well, the thing about newspapers is that, of course, foreign bureaus are closing because no one reads newspapers.
Right.
The average age of a newspaper reader in this country is 55. Okay? If the average age of an apple eater was 55, no one would plant a tree. Okay? They don't read newspapers because by the way, I have to preface it by saying I have none of these modern machines. I don't have a computer or a cell phone or whatever these other things. I don't have any of them. And nor do I read newspapers, by the way. I read the Sunday Times. That's it. It takes me
Once a week?
Yes, it takes me the entire week to read the Sunday Times, and I'm a fast reader.
Right.
And I have friends who say, I read 8 newspapers a day, and I say, it takes me the whole week to read the Sunday Times. And they always say, well, that's because you read it. So most people get their information on computers or iPhones or whatever. Right. And the bad thing about this is that they only get the information they want. Okay, that's the bad thing. And the information that people want is the information they agree with. And this is not new. This is human nature. Okay? Human nature is horrible. That's why it's called human nature and not human art. Okay? So, it is bad that people only get the information they're interested in, because most people are interested in things they already agree with, and so they don't know. For instance, someone comes into my apartment and they go, you read the new Criterion? And I say, yes. And they say, why? And I say, because I already know what I think.
Right.
Right. What they think, by the way, is worse than you could imagine. But, it's kind of shocking, but it's good to know.
That's why I like to watch Fox News. I am just horrified all the time.
Well, Fox News is kind of hard to watch because you hear them. But it is good to check in from time to time.
Exactly, just to see what's happening. Now, I always thought that social media meant people going to cocktail parties, but apparently it is something else. And today I was looking at it, it looked like you're tweeting. Are you tweeting? Or who's?
No, it's a fake tweeter, or whatever
tweeter.
You call it. I actually didn't know this until I was standing outside a restaurant having a cigarette. Thank you, Michael Bloomberg. And an actor, a well-known actor, walked past the restaurant and stopped, said hi to me. So I said hi. I'd never met this guy. And he said, thank you so much for these nice things that you're saying about me tweeting. And I said, I didn't tweet anything nice about you. And he was very embarrassed. He said, but we've been exchanging these tweets. But I said, but you haven't been exchanging them with me. So someone is masquerading as me tweeting.
Do you know who your tweeter is?
No, I don't know. And someone said you can do this thing and take it down. I don't care. Okay, it's not me. So I've announced it to you.
It's very interesting.
You can tell your friends. I have no idea who it is.
No, I was shocked.
I know.
I really thought there was a whole other world that I just thought, really?
No. There's also a Facebook page. I don't have a Facebook page.
I know. I saw that too. I thought,
yes.
oh my God,
yes.
She's done gone over.
No. It has nothing to do with me. I don't know what's on it. I don't want to know. And people always say, well, there's this great thing about you. I don't want to know, because there may be a great thing. I'm sure for each great thing, there's 100 bad things. Okay? Or 1,000 bad things.
Yeah.
I can tell this just by walking down the street. Okay? Some people say, hi, Fran, they're happy to see me.
Right.
Some people scream at me. More scream than say, hi, Fran, so I figured the same thing on the computer.
What do you think will happen about that when you get on the Supreme Court? Will there be a shift in that?
But see, on the Supreme Court, they won't be able to do anything to me. That's the upset, right? The Supreme Court, one of the great things about the Supreme Court
What, you
is
get,
that
like,
it's not
bodyguard?
televised.
Right, exactly.
So when I
Yeah.
watched, you may have watched this, I don't know, during Bush v. Gore, apparently something hard to decide,
Right.
so hard that it was incorrectly decided. Should we count the votes? Yeah. I mean, like a week after Bush v. Gore,
Yeah.
I actually saw David Boies at a party
Yeah.
where, in my opinion, David Boies should have been hiding for the rest of his life in
Yeah.
shame. And I said, how could you lose this? How could you possibly lose this? All you have to say is, should we count the votes? Yes. I mean, what is democracy? What's the definition of democracy? Counting votes.
votes, right.
That's the definition of democracy. So I can't remember what I started saying.
Oh, when you're on the Supreme Court, will the street
the
reaction
Supreme
be
Court,
different?
you can't televise. So when
Right.
I watched Bush v. Gore, which was televised with cartoons, like those court,
Oh, with the-
like
right, exactly,
whatever they're called,
yes.
the people who draw in court,
Right.
which they showed the drawings of people,
Right.
and then they ran the audio of it. So that was the first time that I realized that the judges could interrupt the lawyers, which in regular court they can't.
Interesting. I didn't know
In
that.
all appeals courts they
Right.
can. And so then it made me want to be a Supreme Court judge more than ever.
Right. You've really been practicing.
More than ever. I mean, and because the second that the judge starts talking, the lawyer has to shut up. It's fantastic. It's a dream job. And yet, look who they give it to.
Yeah.
I mean,
And-
Alito. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. And I bet you get health insurance with that job.
I bet you do. Yes. And those swell robes.
Right. Right.
Second only to the Pope.
Which is a little more. That's a kind of a more difficult job these days.
Being the Pope,
Yeah, I think it's.
it's a great job. Come
I
on.
think that people really.
That is my real dream job, but I mean,
Right.
but you don't have to be a lawyer
Did
to
you
be the
put
Pope
your name
either.
in the hat?
I'm sorry?
Did you put your name in the hat this time?
I didn't, but I did feel that during that period where they were looking for the new Pope, I really believed that Bloomberg was trying to figure out how he could get this gig. You know?
I heard actually that they had used the Sorting Hat from Hogwarts, and that was part of the problem. There was like Slytherin, 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 and then they couldn't,
I'm not familiar
I know.
with this work.
It happened later. Exactly. Okay, then skipping ahead. So one of the things I was going to ask you was your thoughts on education, because I know you to be somebody who's very obsessed by grammar, and I always had a very hard time with grammar. I didn't know who was modifying who, and dangling participle sounded to me like sort of like an undescended testicle or something. I didn't know. But what do you think about where we are with literally with education in this country and the ideas of like teaching to a test?
The problem with, people always say, how can we possibly improve the public school system? Here's how you improve the public school system. White people have to send their children to public schools again, period. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was young, the only people who went to private school were rich people. It actually doesn't really matter what rich people do. There aren't that many of them, although here it seems like there's too many of them. But the public schools need the involvement of people who can afford to be involved. Okay, it's really simple. And by the way, all these things they apparently can't teach people how to do, like read. I mean, I went to public school. It was a pretty ordinary public school. Everyone learned how to read. Okay, it's not that hard to learn how to read. Okay, I mean, it's insane, the idea that you can't do this. And they keep saying teachers have to be excellent. Why?
Exactly.
I never had an excellent teacher. Almost no one's excellent.
Yeah.
Why would just teachers have to be excellent? How could the fault of every single thing in the country be the fault of public school teachers? I can't think of a more blameless lot of people than public school teachers. No matter what goes wrong, they blame public school teachers. Okay? And they always say, if I ran my business the way they run the public schools, I'd be out of business. But a business is a really bad model for anything but a business. Yet we now model everything on a business.
Yes.
And there's numerous reasons for this, but let me assure you the advantage is with business. Okay? A business, despite what they want you to think, is the simplest entity on the planet Earth. It is simply an entity, the sole purpose of which is to make a profit, period. It's not complicated. Public school system is really complicated. Really, really complicated. All public institutions are complicated. Way too complicated to be run by businessmen. It's a terrible model. But they love the model of the business, and no one loves it more than our mayor.
Right. Now, when you think about our mayor, or who might be the next mayor, who do you think would make a good mayor?
Me.
Well,
I would make a great mayor of New York, but I don't run for mayor because I couldn't even win this room.
I don't think that's true, actually.
It is true. Let me assure you, it is true.
What if we drafted you?
Still, you need the votes. Okay? I don't care who the next mayor is. I do care, but whoever it is would be better than Bloomberg. Okay? Because one of the main important things is that the next mayor will not be a billionaire. Okay? There should be a rule against having such a rich mayor. You have a mayor who, in a city where property is rented and sold by the square foot, is too rich to live in a place actually called Gracie Mansion. Nope, he doesn't live in Gracie Mansion. It's too small for him. Okay, how could he possibly have a sense of the citizens?
Right.
So that whoever the mayor is will be better. However bad New York is now, it will not stay this bad. How do I know that? It didn't stay the way it was before.
But in Metropolitan Life, you quite prophetically wrote about the state of the city.
Yes, I am a prophet.
I know. And and you've talked. I heard you talk not long ago about what was still happening in the city. Would you ever campaign for someone who was running? Would you ever?
No. I have never given a nickel to a politician. I never would. Because the truth is, it's always the best of the bad lot. It's not a good group. Okay, it's just not a good group.
Is there such a thing as
to the finer among us? It does not. It really doesn't.
Is there such a thing as a good politician?
Well, in my life, the only two people I ever met in elective office who I actually thought were smart were Barney Frank and Pat Moynihan. That's it. Okay, and I've met tons of these morons.
Right.
So they were actually smart, by which I mean really smart.
Right.
Not just smart for politicians. Okay? And Barney Frank would never have been in elective office if he didn't have, Cambridge, which is the only small town with his own foreign policy. And Pat Moynihan was a fluke.
Yeah.
To be in elective office. And he was really smart.
And was in office for a very long time.
Yes. But that will never happen again. Don't worry.
Okay. Does that worry you? What does worry you? What causes you anxiety?
I'm not as anxious as you might imagine. I'm not. I'm not a very anxious person.
Were you ever?
No. I know you're supposed to have had an anxious adolescence or something, but I didn't.
What did you do instead?
I slept. The only time I slept in my life was during my adolescence. Yes.
And then now it's just...
No, I didn't sleep before that, and I haven't slept since. Yes. But during the time I was a teenager, I could not stay awake. Which turns out to have been probably the best thing, because everyone else seems to have had a horrible time.
Right. Do you watch TV?
I watch TV, but I have to say that I watch TV, by which I mean I don't care what's on it.
Right, exactly.
I don't make all these fine distinctions that everyone else does, like, isn't Mad Men fantastic, or, C-SPAN. To me, it's like, I flip.
Do you watch any shows like Homeland or?
No. I don't watch anything you have to watch more than once.
Do you have any thoughts, like, should 60 Minutes be, shorter, 30 minutes? Are there any?
Well, you don't have to watch the whole thing. The good thing is it's not a law yet.
Right.
Basically, I watch TV in the middle of the night, because I don't sleep.
Right.
And I used to always read in the middle of the night, and then I thought to myself, it's too stimulating reading. Watch TV, it's boring.
Right.
And it is boring, but it's apparently too stimulating to let me sleep. Right. As soon as it goes, I can't believe anyone watches commercials. Once they invented the remote control, which is the most modern thing I have in my house, I never have watched a commercial. As a commercial comes on, I flip to the next thing. I watch until there's a commercial, I flip to the next thing. And yet, if I come back, I can follow it. That's how not complicated it is. And people watch these things now on TV, like Homeland.
Right.
Or they're soap operas, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
And they're like 40 hours. I'm too old. I don't have the time.
What's a good day for you?
A good day for me is a night. Okay. I really don't enjoy the daylight hours.
The daylight hours.
No. I just don't. I'm not a morning person. Or even an afternoon person.
Right. It's sort of What time do you not go to sleep? Do you start not going to sleep?
I very rarely start trying to go to sleep before 2 or 3.
Right.
Right? Because that way the failure is shorter.
Right, exactly. So you've talked a little bit at other points about the difference between sort of opinion and fact. And I'm curious, I feel like we live right now in a society where we're living on a lot of people's opinions, but not necessarily any actual information.
Yes, well, that's the problem when people don't believe things anymore. In other words, for instance, the New York Times, it used to be that if you were arguing with someone about something and there were some facts involved in the argument, not always the case in an argument, and you said, no, that's not true, the Times this morning said it was 400. That stopped the argument because everyone believed that if it said 400 in the New York Times was correct. Okay? No one believes the New York Times is correct anymore. No one believes any institution is correct anymore, and so there's not. Every opinion has substitutes for this.
Right.
Part of this is the New York Times' fault, and I mean actually the New York Times, because at a certain point the New York Times, stopped telling you what actually happened, and started every article with in a small dusty town in Afghanistan. Every single article starts that way.
Right.
Okay. Now, this is the fault of more than one person. It's the fault of the guy who's running the Times now, who is the son of the guy who used to run it when I was young. And it's obviously his fault because he must have encouraged these people to write, and there's not supposed to be writing in the newspaper. Okay? That's what books are for. All right? It shouldn't start that. It should start with a bomb went off in Afghanistan or whatever the thing is you're reading it for.
Right.
Okay? If you want to write a book. Okay? And so the whole first paragraph of every story in the Times is writing. And it's not good writing. Okay? So since it's not good writing, how about reporting? Reporting would be good. But the thing is that writing is free, basically, and reporting is expensive. Yeah. And if no one's going to believe the reporting and no one cares about the writing, why read the thing? I mean, and it's filled with opinion. Every single thing is an opinion. And you feel that. You didn't used to feel that. I'm sure it was true to some extent, but not the way it is now. And also, everybody feels that their opinion is worthwhile. And everybody feels that their opinion is interesting. And in fact, that is obviously not true.
Where do you get your facts from?
I don't know, but they come to me in some way. I pay attention.
Right. What do you pay attention to, though?
Well, one thing is
what are your sources?
I observe, okay? For instance, when I'm in the street, which I am all the time,
right,
because I don't have these things, I'm in the street. I'm in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else, whatever they're doing with that thing,
right,
that's where they are, okay? So they're not in the street. So I will frequently say to people, did you see they took this building down? Everyone will go, no. And I'll say, but you pass it every day. How could you not notice it? Because they were doing this. So I noticed it. Of course, it would be good to know that they were going to take the building down beforehand, but I guess it's just my miraculous powers of observation. And there are some facts available.
Yeah.
But in every single thing, including weather. Okay, what could be more factual than weather? When there's something called the Weather Channel. It's on television. It's 24-hour-a-day weather. Really, the weather for New Yorkers is really about clothes. Okay? If you want to know the weather, you want to know what to wear.
Right.
I mean, we're not farmers, I mean, I don't care how much rainfall there was. I don't have any crops out there. I care a coat, a sweater, which coat, which sweater. That's what I care about. I'm not alone in this. Every single person in New York, that's what they care about.
Right.
Like, we should have a New York Weather Channel that really is run by, like, FIT. I don't care. They always tell you Doppler radar. Do you know what that is? No.
I do.
Who's Doppler?
I love Doppler.
I don't know what a Doppler is. They show it to you. They show you the
it's
last 3 hours.
like a sonogram of the, of the weather.
So it basically tells you the gender of the weather?
Yeah,
Or,
it does.
and they always show you the 3-hour Doppler,
Yes,
like
exactly.
what the weather was 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
What could be of less use to anyone than the weather 3 hours ago? Okay?
Yes.
Plus, they are always wrong. Almost always wrong. They are so often wrong that almost no one in New York thought we were really going to have a storm when Sandy came.
Right.
Almost
Yes.
everyone was citing all the other storms we didn't have. Don't you remember in 1971 we put plywood on there was no storm? Don't you remember? I was so astonished when my electricity went off. I was astonished. That's also, especially since kind of turned it off,
Right.
which was immense. No one felt sorry for me because my building wasn't washed away, and also because I'm not the type that people ever have sympathy for. But they shut my lights off. I knew they shut them off because first they dimmed, then they went brighter, then they dimmed, then they went brighter. And I'm alone in my apartment talking to the air, which I imagine kind of to be listening. Don't shut off the lights. Then they shut them off. The second they went off, I went to the sink. I turned the water on, no water. Because you might not know this, I didn't. How does the water get to the 9th floor? Electric pumps. I didn't realize this. I don't know what I thought. I never really had to concern myself with it before. And so I thought, well, they shut them off. They're going to turn it on. I sat there waiting for them to turn the lights on.
For a week?
No. No lights. I perhaps could live without. I doubt it, though.
Right.
I'm not really that type.
Right.
But no water is barbaric.
Right.
So the second it was light, I went where everyone in New York went,
The
to
Carlisle?
the Upper East Side.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which was not just the regular Upper East Side, but it was a festival of wealth. It was like the British Raj up there. I stayed with a friend of mine who went to buy food at this place where it's so expensive to buy food, you could go either there or to Cartier.
Right.
And when she came back, she said that a woman in line, because of course they were stocking up on the Upper East Side because you never know what could happen.
Right.
A woman in line yelled at the counterman the following statement: "What do you mean you're out of celery remoulade?" So I said to my friend, I hope the guy said, "I hope you know, madam, that there are people in Staten Island with no celery remoulade at all." So the reason I was unprepared for the lights to go off is because the weathermen are always wrong, and also because I kept saying the lights are not going to go out in Manhattan; they're underground.
Right.
But I didn't expect Con Ed to turn them off. I don't know why. It's not that it's been delightful my entire life. During the time where I had no lights, the Con Ed bill came. So they managed to get the bill to the house. And I thought, should I pay this bill or should I write, "Are you kidding me," on this bill?
Now, I remember you once wrote an article about camping, and I really think the first line was, "Taxi."
No, I never wrote an article about camping. I actually thought you were younger than this, Amy. I'm glad you brought this up. I was on the cover of a magazine called Outside.
Yeah, I remember
Yes.
this, exactly.
I had never heard of this magazine, but it's a magazine. I think it's about camping. I don't know if it still exists. It may or may not still exist. And they called me up and said, we have a great idea. We're going to send this photographer and a writer. You're going to go camping, and they're going to write about your camping experience. And I said, I'm not going camping.
Right, exactly.
And they said, it'll be so funny. We're sending this guy. He's a great photographer. This girl, she's a fantastic writer. You'll go camping. And I said, I'm not going camping. And then they said, we'll put you on the cover of the magazine. And so I had only ever been on the cover of one other magazine, which was Interview. Mm-hmm. So I thought, they're both really camping.
Exactly.
So I thought it would be a kind of balance. So I went camping, and the guy, the photographer who picked me up to take me to the camping place, which was, I think, in Delaware, and turned out to be a property his uncle owned, told everyone, you can't believe it. I went to pick up Fran to take her camping, and she was standing in front of her building wearing a camel's hair coat, carrying a suitcase. No one brings a suitcase camping, apparently. They bring like a knapsack, which I don't have a knapsack, so because I don't camp.
Right.
And I don't have any camping clothes because I live in a city where a camel's hair coat is a very good thing to have. So we went camping for one night, which was horrendous.
Exactly.
Like, we got to this place, the guy bought all this, the guy was a great cook, of course. He bought all this great food. He cooked this dinner outside on a fire. And then we had this, like, delicious dinner, and then everything was done. And then it was 6:30 in the afternoon.
Right, exactly.
And I said, let's go to a movie.
Right, exactly.
And he said, we can't, we're camping. And I said, I know, but like 10 minutes down the highway that we got off of, I saw a movie theater. He said, we can't, we're camping. I said, well, let's not tell them we went to the movies. Because on the way up to the camping, or down, wherever Delaware is, on the way to the camping place, at a certain point, I started hearing gunshots because it was deer hunting season.
Right.
And I grew up in New Jersey. I know about deer hunting. So I said, we can't go camping because they're hunting deer. And the one thing I know about deer hunters is they are not marksmen. Okay? I'm afraid I'll be shot by a deer hunter. So I made them stop at a deer hunting supply store, of which there are many, by the way, to buy me these orange clothes.
Yes, of course, exactly.
So I was wearing these orange clothes so that after I was killed by a deer hunter, he would have to say, I thought she was a deer dressed in orange clothes.
Or an escapee from maximum security.
Yes. So after they did this whole thing, I did this camping thing, they called me and said, we have a problem. The photograph that the guy took for the cover is supposed to be horizontal and it's vertical or something like that, so we have to go camping again. So I said, I'm not going camping again. So what we did was, the photograph on the cover, which is me sitting next to a tent, was taken in Washington Square Park. Before they tore it down.
Right, exactly. Right. Before they centered the fountain.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's just see here.
That is actually on the subject of bravery.
Yes.
Yes, I slept in a tent.
I have such actually camping phobia. I couldn't even sleep in a tent.
I didn't
Actually,
really
I also
sleep.
can't urinate outdoors. I've tried. I keep trying, but I can't.
Well,
do
I
it.
did ask where the bathroom was when we arrived, yes.
Yes.
Yes. To me, camping is something that should be in human history in the past.
Right.
Like, okay, first we were fish, then we came out of the ocean,
Right.
then we lived in caves, then in tents,
Right.
then in apartments.
Right, exactly.
Why go backwards to tents?
Yeah.
I mean, worldwide, most people in tents are not there deliberately.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Right.
Like,
Yes.
when you see on the news people in tents, it's usually a catastrophe has occurred.
Right.
Okay? Not a vacation.
Right, exactly. It is a bit odd.
Yes, if you go into one of apparently the millions of refugee camps there are in the world
Right.
at the present
Right.
moment, there seem to me to be more people living in tents than inside. Okay? And this is caused, again, by human nature. If you went to any of these places, I don't care where in the world, and you said, the tent, you prefer this, or how about an apartment? Or
Right.
maybe all the people who are presently camping, leaving their apartments empty, could invite these people to live in their apartments while they're camping. There's my solution to the refugee problem.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Is there anything that you're loath to discuss publicly?
Try me. And myself,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I don't often talk about myself, and this will not be the time I'll start.
Right, exactly. Speaking of which, so you've had writer's block for a very long time. Have the symptoms changed at all? Has it gotten better, worse, or it's just?
You get used to everything. Yeah. Yes. I don't really think about it anymore. Other people do.
Do you resist it anymore? Or you just kind of? Do you accept it as a given now?
I'm not as accepting as you might imagine.
I wouldn't think you
Okay.
were. I mean,
So,
I don't
I
imagine
have,
it
for
at all.
instance, I have 2 half-finished books. The second half-finished book was an invention of my publisher to replace the other half-finished book.
Right.
And so I did actually say to my publisher at a certain point, I have these 2 half-finished books. 2 half-finished books. 2 halves is 1 whole.
Right.
They're unrelated to each other, of course, except by author. You could actually publish a half and half. You could turn it around.
Right.
And- Yes, this didn't go over that well. I mean, I owe them about $1 billion. But they seem to be doing fine.
Right.
And they're not getting it from me because I don't have it.
Right. I think they should publish them, actually.
Yes, well, they don't.
Would you? I mean,
They believe they're going to get the other half of both of them.
Right. Exactly. What do you think the likelihood of that is?
You know what? I think it's possible. I think it's possible. Okay. I mean, I believe that it is possible.
What will it take?
I don't know. If I knew what it would take, this wouldn't have happened.
Exactly.
When people say, "Why don't you write?" I would always say, "If I knew, I would be writing."
Do you think it's? I mean, what I've always known about you is that your standard is incredibly high. Is it so high that you can't?
That's possible.
Yeah.
Sloth is also probably a more significant thing
Right.
because it is very hard.
Oh, I know.
All right, as you're aware, right?
Yes.
So it is
Yes.
really, really hard.
Yes, it's
and,
awful.
you know, I've always thought that the only job that's harder than writing is coal mining. Okay, the only people I ever feel sorry for, job-wise, are coal miners. No matter what coal miners ever ask for, not that they ever get it, yes,
Right.
they should have it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's actually a worse job than writing. But writing is very hard, and I am very lazy.
I think of them as similar, actually. I really do. Because I think when you write a novel, you go down some hole for 7 years, and you come back and you're completely deformed and dirty, and you don't know anything about what's happening on the surface, and you're broke. And you have no health insurance.
Yes. I think coal miners would not agree with you.
I know. I should, in theory, go and visit, but
No, but coal mining is worse.
Yeah, no, I
Okay,
think it's true. Yes.
Let's accept that.
Yes, I will
Okay.
accept that.
And coal miners are braver.
Yes, that's true too.
Okay, because every day they could die.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Writers just want to die.
Exactly.
Okay, they might actually die.
Yeah, it's more voluntary.
I mean, the fact that you think it might be preferable to be a coal miner, that's how horrible writing is. And the only people who like to write are bad writers. Okay, they love to write. All right.
Yeah.
Whenever anyone says, "I love to write,"
exactly.
you can don't read the
Right,
book.
right. Yes.
Okay? Because the only good writer, great writer I've ever known who loves to write is Toni Morrison. And when I asked Toni once, "Why do you love to write?" she gave a great answer. She said, "Because otherwise you're stuck with life."
That's totally true, yes.
On the other hand, you could also read, which is what I do.
Right, exactly. So, going back to the pen of it all, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience, but, part of how this international festival started was the discussion about how few writers are translated from other languages into English. And I'm curious, are there writers writing in other languages that you particularly read or enjoy?
I am monolingual. Okay? So if they're not translated, I don't know if I would like to read them.
But are there ones that have been translated? Are there writers whose...
Yeah, of course. I mean, do you think I've only... Yes. Yes, of course. I mean, I certainly think that, more writers should be translated because there aren't enough good ones in English.
Right.
Okay? I mean, there are too many writers, there are too many books published, but there are not enough good books. So I think it would be very good if all the books written in other languages were translated in English so then I could make the final decision.
Right. Exactly.
I do think that of course there should be more books translated.
Yeah.
But in fact, there are fewer. Every year there are fewer.
Absolutely. And in the U.S. in particular, there are fewer books translated than in any other country, actually, except for certain countries where nothing is translated or published.
Yes, and that is because they think that no one will buy them.
Yeah.
And they probably are right. But I don't care.
That's still
I'm
no
not in the
excuse.
publishing business.
Right, exactly, right.
Yes, of course there should be more translated.
Yeah.
But when people argue about which translation of a book is better, I don't enter into this argument.
Yes.
Because I always think, how do you know? And if you've ever worked on translation of your own books, like say with a Japanese translator,
exactly.
as I did, after one day I said to her, I give up. Because you are not asking me what is the word for this. You're asking me what is the thought for this.
Right, exactly. Yes.
And so, I mean, there probably are languages closer to English than Japanese, but I found it to be just an impossible thing to deal with.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. I also always get these very strange questions where they'd say things like, when you write Oprah, do you mean opera?
Yes.
Just like, it already...
That's a very penetrating insight.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we hope for from translators.
Right, exactly, yes. Let's see if we have questions. I mean, I have 1,000 more, but I'm sure other people have them.
Yes. Who do I like to read? You know what? I am the world's most promiscuous reader. All right? I am the slut of literature. Okay? There's lots of writers I like. You know, I don't usually like to say them because people always think that means that's your favorite writer. I don't have a favorite writer. Only children have favorite writers. You know, or only people who've read very few books have favorite writers. Or politicians. You know, politicians always have favorite writers. You know, Republicans' favorite writer is always Ayn Rand. Okay? Because Atlas Shrugged is the favorite novel of people who never read a novel before.
Do you reread books?
I do.
Yeah.
I do reread books. In fact, just last night, I made a note to myself, reread The Scarlet Letter. Because someone made the statement to me last night at dinner that all of American culture can be seen in The Scarlet Letter. So this is the last time I read The Scarlet Letter. I was myself like in junior high school. For instance, I did also, several years ago, reread Ethan Frome and Silas Marner. Because these were two books that I hated when I was young by writers that I love. And I loved them when I reread them.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually said to a friend of mine, I said, I was the only person on the plane reading Silas Marner. And she said to me, you were the only person on any plane reading Silas Marner.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's true, and I think it's interesting how books change or how you read them differently at different points in your life.
Yes, but they have to be really good to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay? So that it isn't that Ethan Frome wasn't good when I first read it. It's that I didn't understand that it was good.
Right.
Since I was a child. Yes?
Hey, this might be a silly question, but since you said that we should go back to tense because it's in the past, should we go back to old literature?
He said, this might be a silly question, and he was not wholly wrong. Which was, since I said we shouldn't go back to tense, does that mean we shouldn't go back to old literature? That's not even approaching an analogy. No. Yes. Yes.
I was at town hall and noticed something at that if I could have, I would have asked at the time. Who polishes your boots, and is there a job opening?
Who polishes my boots, and is there a job? There's only two places that I go to get my boots polished. One is there's no place downtown, by the way, and this is something that perhaps those of you recent graduates from college who can't find a job, a shoe shine parlor is much needed downtown. There's one on the west side and one on the east side. On the west side, it's right on Broadway between 59th and 58th. It's called Dino's Shoe Repair. Fantastic shoe shine. On the east side, it's on 59th Street between Madison and Park. It's called Jim Shoe Repair. Okay, both excellent places. See, this is why I thought bravery. Is that a good subject? Yes. Have I ever actually written you mean writing myself in as a candidate? No, I never have. I vote for a reason, not to amuse myself. No, I've hardly ever voted for anyone who wins, even though they're real candidates, let alone writing myself in. No, I've never written myself in. Yes. Yes, Oscar Wilde had both, and how do I know this? Because I have personally seen Oscar Wilde's original manuscripts, and the first time I saw them, there's almost no work on them. Okay, I mean, the reason I like to look at manuscripts is to see the work on them. Something that's disappeared now because all you have is whatever is on the computer.
A chipped hard drive.
Yeah, something. So to see the work on a manuscript is really interesting. And the Morgan Library owns many Wilde manuscripts, something that would not be allowed now because they would not be in their native country. An idiotic idea. We live in a moment where everyone keeps saying everything's global, but everything is very tribal. I mean, I know you didn't ask this, but I'm incredibly opposed to the idea that works of art have to stay in the country that they were created in. It's idiotic, and it's counter the times. Anyway, the Morgan Library acquired these before these law. And the first time I saw these wild manuscripts, it's appalling if you're a writer to see there's hardly any work on them. There's more work on my thank you notes. And I actually told this to Toni Morrison. I said, there's no work on the wild manuscripts. Go look at them. And she said, they're not real manuscripts. They can't be. They're fair copies because you used to have to write it before it went to the printer. But they, in fact, were real manuscripts. And then when you think about Wilde, especially, you think they would almost have to be written that way. You know, those thoughts occur to you. And the fact that, you know, the elegance of the grammar and things like that, that was really innate to the times. You know, that's not specific to Wilde. But I think in these times, in my own case, for instance, the talking comes easily, the writing comes hard. Possibly the writing could come more easily if I didn't think about it so much. I don't know. Yes, and Proust is the opposite of Wilde. Anyway, you know, anyway, he's the opposite of Wilde. And, you know, not as funny. Okay, she wants to know, I watched the Menendez trials. Did I watch the Anita Hill hearings? Which I did, which I would not actually have thought of in relation to the Menendez trials. But yes, I did watch them. They were, I see many people here are too young to even know what this was. What this was Clarence Thomas, one of the worst people in the history of the Supreme Court. I mean, one of the worst judges in the history of the Supreme Court. During his, what do they call those hearings? Confirmation hearings, yes. Where I must say the Senate distinguished itself. Yes, Biden, yes, I remember it very vividly. It was appalling, that's what I thought of it. It was appalling, and the result was worse. Because, you know, the Supreme Court justices, I don't know this for a fact, but it is my belief that they live longer than anyone. Okay? The Supreme Court is the fountain of youth. You know, you have only to be appointed to the Supreme Court, which is a lifetime appointment, to ensure the fact that you will live to be 150. And Clarence Thomas was, I think, in his 50s, maybe even younger, when he was appointed to the Supreme Court. Of course, when they invented this, people died at 42. And so he's going to be there, you know, there's no one in this room who will outlive Clarence Thomas. And who will make one horrific judgment after another. Okay, so in a just world, Anita Hill would have been on the Supreme Court, not him. So he's on for life, and he's not that old.
No, he's not that old.
I mean, the oldest person I think on the Supreme Court now is Ginsburg.
Yes.
Yes, and she's good. She's really good. We would like her to be the youngest person, him to be the oldest person, but that's not the way it works out. He's heard me speak about gay marriage, and now that's inevitable. I believe we have gay marriage in New York now.
Right.
Yes. Federally. Marriage laws are state laws, you may know that. He heard me speak about it, and how do I engage with friends who really want gay marriage? I have to explain to you I would not, if we had voted on gay marriage, I mean individually as opposed, I would have voted for it. I know people want it. I just don't want it, personally. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't want it personally. I never wanted it. I never understood it. I still don't understand it. I do not understand it. You know, even when it was really hard to be gay, by which I mean illegal, which everyone seems to have forgotten, when it was illegal to be gay, there were always two really good things about being gay. You didn't have to get married, and you didn't have to go in the army. These were always the two perks. The rest of your life might have been a total misery, but these two fantastic things were yours without asking. Okay? These are the two most confining institutions in the country, marriage and the military. These are the two things you won. Congratulations. I personally listened to all the arguments for gay marriage, and here's what I always heard as the arguments. One was always that if your partner, a word I loathe in this context, by the way, because to me, a partner is like your father's brother he's in business with and who's stealing from him. That's a partner. Okay? So to me, it lacks romance, the word. So people say, but if my partner is in intensive care in the hospital, I can visit her. To me, another perk of being gay. To me, think of me what you will, but my response would be, of course, I would like nothing better than to spend the evening in intensive care, but they won't let me. So I'll be at Bar Pity. So to have to go to intensive care is something that I would prefer to avoid. And the other thing had to do with money. There are 1 million financial advantages to being married, which are tax advantages. As a person who is absolutely, irrevocably single, I think it's unfair. I don't think married people should get any tax advantages. I don't care whether they're gay or straight. I don't understand why the reason we had these tax advantages and all these advantages for people who are married was to promote marriage, heterosexual marriage, because people were supposed to stay married forever and take care of their children. Now, no one stays married forever, which is why they let you have gay marriage. By the way, they only let people have things when the things have lost value. Okay? So marriage used to be very valuable, and is no longer valuable, so they let gay people have it. Being a doctor used to be a great profession, now it's not, so girls can be doctors. All the things that they let people have that they used to keep you from having, if they were still very valuable, they wouldn't let you have them. Don't kid yourself. Now you're stuck with having to get married. To me, I'm not interested. But as long as it's not mandatory, I think it's fine. And I would have voted for it because I know that people wanted it, and now you see already what you have is that other great corollary of marriage, gay divorce, which I don't know why that has to be formalized, And this is all, in the end, about money. Things like divorce are about money. If you don't think so, get divorced. And so that's what I think about gay marriage. She said, I describe myself as lazy, and so she wants to know what my thoughts are on procrastinating and the best way. Look, I happen to feel that I have this field to myself, okay? When it comes to procrastinating, I'm pretty much, a legend. Here's what can substitute for doing the work you're supposed to be doing. Anything. Okay? Anything. You have total freedom of choice. Okay? I don't know what you would enjoy doing more than working. To me, I would enjoy anything more than working. So it really, even something that seems unenjoyable seems more enjoyable than working. For instance, I believe that writers tend to have the cleanest houses in New York. Okay? And it isn't that cleaning is enjoyable. It's just that it is if you compare it to writing. I remember the first apartment I had that had a washing machine. A friend of mine said, oh no, writers can't have washing machines. Because if you have a washing machine, you're going to be doing wash all the time instead of writing. So writers also have very clean clothes. So, washing clothes, that's my advice to you. Reading is the best thing, by the way. That is mostly what I've done. Mostly, I suppose if you added up the hours of what I've done most of my life, it is read. I hope you heard this question, which was less of a question and more of a suggestion. And the suggestion was that since I make snap judgments, why don't I make snap judgments about my writing? Are you under the impression that I've deliberated about not writing? Something can start out as a snap judgment and extend for decades. Because judgments that I make about writing, about my writing, are fairly severe. I do believe that's an aspect of it. Yeah. I know that people think of me as harsh in my judgments, and I think it's just having standards. But I apply the same standards to myself. Why didn't I try the approach of Oscar Wilde, who by the time he was my age was dead for many years, and make the writing more like talking? This has been suggested by many people, including my editor. But I seem to be constitutionally unable to do this, and that is probably because I am maybe more naturally a judge than a writer. But you are correct that would be a good tack to take if I was able to take that tack. Any other questions that are not suggestions to improve myself? Yes. Because, truthfully, I'm not asking you questions. No, what this was, it was a story I recounted in the movie. It was a rally. It was in the 70s. I think it was in the 70s. It was whenever, was Jimmy Carter president in the 70s? Yes. Okay, Carter was a president, and there was still the Cold War. And Carter somehow convinced the Russians to, not Carter himself alone, but during that administration, to let some Jews out of Russia. And this was a rally for Soviet Jewry at the UN, outside the UN. It was gigantic. It was 250,000 people attended this thing. It was run by Joe Papp, a man who used to run the Public Theater. And he called and asked me to participate in this, which was just to read letters from Russians who were called refuseniks. I don't mean all Russians. These Russians were called this. Maybe not by Russians, but by us. And there was a huge platform outside. It was 250,000 people. It's a gigantic audience. I personally, as you can see, I've never had that many people in the audience. I found it exhilarating. I looked out at the crowd and thought, this is fantastic. Joe Papp told me, you have to say something before you read this letter. Do you have something to say? I said, no, I don't have something to say. Well, say something. I had already, having been on this platform already for about 20 minutes, I had already had fights with 3 rabbis. Okay? Because believe me, if there's a rabbi within my, sphere, I will fight with him. And I feel free to fight with rabbis. I may feel the same way about other religious figures, but I don't feel free to yell at them. So I had already been fighting with the rabbi who wanted me to get off the platform because I was wearing pants. Okay? And this was before there were this many crazy Jews in Brooklyn. Believe me, this was... Anyway, so Joe Papp goes, just say something funny or something before you read this thing. Almost everyone else involved in this were actors, and they were very good at reading people's letters. I'm not very good at this. Gregory Peck was there. Look him up if you're too young. And he was very good at doing, obviously much better acting than me. So I came out. I didn't really, I was unaware of these crazy Jews then. The crazy Jews are the Jews that regular Jews such as me call the crazy Jews, and the Gentiles call the Jewish community. And so I thought they were just regular Jews, like me. Or I thought maybe not even everyone was Jewish. I thought maybe they were just also people believing that people should be able to leave Russia if they wanted to. And so I said, I'm certain that when, I can't even remember who was the head of Russia at the time. It wasn't Putin yet. And Putin is like yes, I may be right. I said, I'm sure that when he sees this on television, he sees all these people here, he'll instantly comply with your request. Because I know that I, for one, would never want this many Jewish women angry at me. And instead of a few laughs, I was booed off the stage by 250,000 crazy Jews who were so angry at me that I had to be taken out of the area by police. There was no bombing involved. This was the 70s. This is before we had bombing here. Bombing here is really recent. Oh, bombing as a comedian, I see. Yes, we still have that. Yes. It would be good to substitute that, don't you think, for the other bombing? Yes, I think that would be a good thing worldwide. Yes. I'll let you know if it ever happens. What advice do I have to young aspiring writers? Have you ever considered coal mining? Here is my main advice to young aspiring writers. Do not go to writing school. It's a ridiculous idea. It's an absurd idea. Did you go to writing school?
Yes.
Okay. It's a ridiculous idea. Writing is a talent. They cannot teach you how to write. It's like going to tall school. Okay? They cannot teach you how to write. Writing is not a profession. It is a punishment from God. Okay? So don't go to writing school. Do not go to writing school. That is my number one advice to you. That is my number 1 through 1,000 advice. Do not go to writing school. Instead, spend those 2 years or however long it is reading. The only thing they can teach you in school for writing, which they don't, and certainly not at that level, is grammar. And you started with this question about grammar, and I will end with this question about grammar, which is that when I was in public school, in elementary school, they taught you grammar. I don't think they do anymore.
No.
Okay? And the reason that you didn't learn it is because you can't really learn it. You just have to memorize it. It's not something to learn in the sense of, because it's not a body of knowledge. It's a set of rules. So you have to memorize it, which is boring. Okay? And which children will not do anything boring anymore because they're so busy acquiring self-esteem that they can't spend based on nothing that I can say that they can't be forced to memorize this. So that even though I was forced to memorize it, I was forced only at the level they could force you in public school. So that is why for many years I had on my desk a list of people I knew who went to Catholic school. Because the only people who really know grammar are people who went to Catholic school. And the reason for that is because when they gave a wrong answer in Catholic school, the nuns were allowed to hit them. Okay, and that is the only way you can learn this. So there's no other way, because it's just a set of rules that make no sense. It's illogical. English grammar is exceptionally illogical. You know, that is why it's so hard. Whenever people criticize immigrants to this country, can you believe they don't speak English? I always think, I don't know how anyone can speak English. Truthfully, because when it is something you have to be taught from birth, and you have to be taught it correctly, and you have to hear it correctly, and you have to be corrected constantly. The only way that people really talked to children when I was a child, by people I mean parents and teachers, was just to constantly tell them what to do. Okay? And so that the reason that I believe I speak, grammatically most of the time is simply because every time I opened my mouth as a child, when I said something wrong, someone corrected me. So that I actually do this to other people now. I do it to the television. And it's amazing. President Obama, a highly educated person, much more educated than I am, very intelligent, makes grammatical errors all the time, and I know that is because his mother did not say, when he said I instead of me, she did not say me. I say to the TV set to him all the time, me. I'm yelling at him. No, me. And this is the most common mistake that people make now.
Yes.
And the reason I know that is because I was yelled at 1 million times. So maybe we could, since no one is able to get a job apparently, maybe they could become employed as people who go around correcting other people's grammar. So maybe we should bring back the public scold, okay? One is insufficient.
I think we have time for one last question.
I truly don't know what you're asking me.
Let's go for a different last question.
I'm not objecting to your question. I don't understand your question.
Your two books, I read them as art history.
You read them as art history. You are an excellent reader. Okay? If you read them as art history, you're an excellent reader. If you're asking me my opinion of the current art world, I will say this, that when I was young, the entire art world fit in one restaurant. Literally, in one restaurant. Okay, so that now it's gigantic. And now it's not called the art world. It's called the art market. Okay? And this is an absolutely correct use of the English language. Okay? So it's a market. I subscribe to a magazine called Art and Auction. Okay? I don't know what the word art is doing in this magazine. Okay? And I'm very interested in this happening. There are also more artists than there used to be. Okay? They all go to art school. Okay? It's a good gig now, being an artist. I wish I had thought of this scam when I was young. So that there are more artists than ever before, but just the way there are more writers. However, these things are talents that are randomly sprinkled among the populace. There's probably always relatively the same number of talented people. It's just that some people are luckier than others. Some people are lucky even in the timing of their lives, and some eras are luckier than other eras. If you ask me, is this a fantastic era for the visual arts? I would say it doesn't seem so to me. I mean, it seems to me that I have been looking at the same stuff, basically, and I'm talking about what passes for contemporary art, for 35 years, okay? So that basically the current art is old. That's my objection to it, is that it is old, okay? I mean, I am sick of looking at these Warhols. I am sick of looking at them. They're not that good, by the way, okay? They're really not very good. I know you're not allowed to say this, okay? But it's banal to keep looking at the same stuff over and over again. And the reason everyone loves this stuff is the reason they loved it from the beginning. They loved it from the beginning because they recognized it, okay? They recognized it right away. The second they saw it, they said, yes, a Brillo box. It was a relief after Jackson Pollock for them to recognize something, okay? Here's what people don't like, abstraction, in any way. They don't like it because not everyone recognizes it the second they see it, okay? So that most of the things you see now, you recognize the second you see them, even if you're seeing them for the first time. But unfortunately for me, I'm seeing it for the millionth time. So if there are any artists in the audience, do something different. Do something new. Annoy me in a different way. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you very much.